Yeah, it's great to be here. And to be clear, I'm a champion for a particular age group. Lots of people beat me by quite a bit of time. But what I'm going to try to do here is kind of walk through what's going on. Why is there this shift to containers? And really kick off this conference, which I think is a historic moment in the growth of the container ecosystem, DevOps ecosystem, cloud native ecosystem, et cetera, here in India. So if you'll allow me, I am going to share some lessons learned the hard way in production, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about what I've seen in IT over the last long time, let's say 15, 20 years. Tweet, that's me. Feel free to reach out to me, or LinkedIn, or what have you. That happens to be my Twitter account, Powell101. And let's get started. So I'm going to start with a quiz. So anyone have any idea? I don't know how you would, if you can even see this. What this curve refers to. So it's an x-axis, as you can see, and then this gets to 3.7 million. Or how about this curve? This is, again, an x-axis, and that gets to, that number is hard to read, it's $143 billion. Anyone? It's fairly, the hint is, it's fairly germane. How about if I put timelines? Anyone? You can just shout the answer, or not. How about now? So that's how many of us there are, developers in India. It's actually, this is 2015, so now the number would be up here. More developers in India now than in the United States. And I mean, we've gone from, what is that, $1 billion back in the 80s to 143 billion plus. I mean, what an amazing force. And if you look at open source communities, including Kubernetes, including our own, which is rather smaller than Kubernetes today, OpenEBS, you see the real impact of developers from this part of the world. And what I want to see more of, and what this talk touches upon, is let's start more projects here. Not just contribute to interesting projects from here, but why not start more projects right here in our backyard? This is more of an eye chart. This comes from NASCOM, and you can see, and these slides will be posted, of course. But you can see that what they're saying is that now and going forward, we really need to start changing the way that we're doing business. So what used to be an outsourcing business now, I've called it out here, now we need to be thinking about the startup ecosystem. You go to, we had a OpenEBS meetup when I was here last time at NASCOM in Bangalore, and there's this project, 10,000 startup warehouse project. That's one and the same time inspiring and a little bit almost, disturbing, right? I mean, think about 10,000 startups. In my free time, when I'm not doing this kind of thing, I invest in startups. 10,000 new startups coming out of this region really has the power to, I would argue, change the world. And the government, NASCOM, that institute is really calling for us to start to take that leap more and to get out on a limb and to start these kinds of new projects. I'm going to talk about Kubernetes as really a fundamental piece of what I see as the most exciting thing happening in IT, and I could say today, the most exciting thing that has happened in my career in IT. And a few of the points I'll touch upon is DevOps, open source, maybe I'll talk about machine learning, I don't know. Anyone know what holacracy or holacracy is? Anyone? Yes, Ian, of course. This is if you think about it, in a way. This is a layman's explanation. This is taking sort of the mindset, the ethos of a real Scrum, agile way of building software, where you don't have hierarchy per se, and applying it to running businesses. Right? Pretty innovative and arguably a little crazy, but you can read about it. Zappos, the shoe company in the US that Amazon bought, is a big advocate of it. Pretty fascinating. So I should introduce myself. I'm from here. This is a state in the south of the United States called Georgia. I went to school out here, Massachusetts, and I made my way out to California about a long time ago, again, over 20 years ago. In that time, I've been lucky enough to founding CEO of a few companies that got to a certain level. Claris, we sold to Riverbed. Exenta is still going, and I'm sort of blamed for or credited with helping coin the term software-defined storage and open storage a number of years ago. StackStorm, I went back to the early side and founded StackStorm, which we sold to Brocade about a year ago. And this is really DevOps at a big scale. Automation, open source, used by folks like Netflix. So next time Netflix is working, StackStorm has something to do with it. These days, as I said, I'm investing in a bunch of companies, and I joined end of last year as chairman of CloudByte, which is the sponsor of OpenEBS. This isn't the marketing spiel, but I do hope we get some GitHub stars out of this discussion. Can I count on at least one star out of this game? And I'll just say that I'm a big optimist. I think that you touched on it in the opening. Containers are eating the world. There's this whole kind of a hypey thing, software is eating the world. I actually think it's true. I think that the outcomes of the top operators of software, whether those happen to be hardware companies like Tesla, real hardware, or Facebook, or et cetera, those that are really good at building and running software are transforming just about every industry in the world, even government, hopefully, possibly. So I am an optimist. You guys, I don't know if you can read this. This was in VentureBeat, and it basically says, I think the title is, "We're not in a bubble, we're in a revolution." So I'm a firm believer that what we're seeing now is not just a bubble. There is a bubble in certain valuations, but it's actually signs of a real transformation in how tech is built. So I'm not going to go through the whole agenda today, other than to say that I'm excited about it. I'm honored to be here and to hopefully do a good job of kicking this off. And you're going to hear a lot about what is it like to run these systems in production. I'm going to share with you a couple more stories here in a second. And it's great to have Ian here as well, talking about openness in containers as well. There was, I think, a fear in the back of some people's minds 2 years ago when Docker really exploded that is this going to be VMware Take Two? Which, there's nothing wrong with VMware. I've got a lot of friends. It's a great company, but they certainly played the traditional software, enterprise software game of trying to build leverage, right? Aha. You're running your stuff on my VMs, now I can sell you everything around it because I control the APIs. And one thing, amongst others, that Google and others have done is to look forward and say, hey, maybe we should have some open container interfaces so that Docker doesn't become a point of leverage and slow down innovation much in the way that some would argue even VMware has done in the past. So a little bit of data on why I'm so confident that those of us using containers to run and build systems like the Netflixes and also more traditional enterprises, I'll talk about a bank here in a second, are winning. I mean, you've got 2,000 times shorter lead times. This is outcomes from a DevOps survey. This is actually the wrong slide. I should be using this one. These kinds of outcomes 200 times more frequent deployments. These kinds of outcomes do change industries, right? It translates into competitive advantage, and you'll see here when I talk about a couple of case studies what I'm talking about. What's more, if you don't really care about, hey, it's Tesla, it's, you know, what industry is getting transformed? I mean, our industry or your industry, the Indian tech industry, has got to be transformed as well. I've been spending some time here, right, meeting with the obvious, our big partners, some of the great tech firms in the world. And what this, you can't read this, but what this says is the productivity of the average employee in Indian tech has gone up to about $35,000, that might be $38,000 a year. And that's great. It's about, well, it's a small fraction, let's say, of what a Facebook, okay, extreme, 1 billion users, or what some of the top DevOps operators are achieving. Not 20%, but 1/20th of, or you know, 1/30th, or in the case of Facebook, massively more, right? Their productivity per engineer is about $1.7 million, right, per engineer. So in other words, each person there is generating about $1.7 million in revenue. That's why they can give away all that cool food, right? Because at the core of it, it's a tech development company where the developers are treated very well. I mean, they own the company, right? Mark himself is such a developer. So they have done everything they can do to get barriers out of the way of the productivity of you and I, people who write code a heck of a lot better than I do, right? That is at the core of why Facebook has been able to transform and create that whole industry. I guess they didn't create it, there was Friendster and stuff. We've got some work to do. 38K employee. I mean, look, this is a hockey stick. It's part of an incredible success story, but we've got a long way to go if we're going to be competing over the next 20, 30 years. And it comes down to removing barriers to developers doing a good job. So I'm going to stop for a second and talk about some friends who have been trying to transform a traditional retailer. Marks and Spencer, you may know about them. I'll just touch on it briefly. And I'll start by saying, just look at that. Holy smackers. I mean, 80 applications, 132 interfaces, and you know, somehow they get the strategic imperative, you know, we've got to compete with Amazon, right? They're a retailer. So good luck. I mean, just understanding what all those interfaces are itself has got to be a challenge. And the way IT has traditionally been managed, if your job is, I own this very important piece, whatever that is, I don't know what that is. I own 12 of the 80 applications. The way IT traditionally has been managed, as you know, and it gets to low productivity per developer is, cool. So do your builds, get some new software in there. Oh, you're ready to actually ship. Well, you know, we need to wait on this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, the whole freaking team. It'll take a year, right? 6 months, a year build cycles. It's not apocryphal. I've actually had teams where it took us 6 months or a year to get anything out the door. It's a travesty, but it is reality. It's how most systems today out there are. And what we're saying is, it's broken. It's fundamentally broken. And if you start with the mindset of me, developer, I deserve to be able to get feedback on my code, not in 6 months, but in like today. Like, I'd like to ship something into production today. Start with that expectation. Now, you may have to quit where you're working and go work at GitHub, where that actually will be your first day experience. I don't work for GitHub, but where welcome to GitHub. You're going to ship production code into production today. That's what's at the cutting edge here. And you know, it's a little unfair. GitHub is a born on the web company, obviously using to some extent someone else's code, and we'll get a file system underneath. But let's talk about what did they do? Marks and Spencer, real retailer, faced with competition, from arguably the most powerful or one of the most successful companies of our age, Amazon. So this is, okay, they claimed they were doing quarterly releases, not 6-month releases, lots of testing, big monolithic. The operations team's role was to say, don't do that, I don't know if I can support it, and then to support it like mad. They didn't have much visibility into what was happening on the developer side. Their business was at risk, is at risk, but was at risk. Software eating the world means somebody gets eaten, right? So what they have done is transformed, this is supposed to say after, but after, what they have done is transform their release cycles for the e-commerce piece specifically. So this is, you go onto marksandspencer.com, and it's taken them years, it's taken them taking a bimodal approach to IT. And now, okay, it's not today, but it's pretty darn close. 5 to 7 releases per week, tiny releases. How do you minimize risk? Well, you just, you take small slices. It's a 12-factor, not a monolithic. They claim it's no ops now, right? So the role of operations has changed fundamentally. Speaking of operations, I had a real pleasure to get to know some of the Facebook team when I was running Stackstream. So we started this meetup around what we called event-driven automation, and Facebook is famous in this space. And so we got to know them, we got under NDA and stuff like that. And they have a system internally that's not dissimilar from Google's Org, which then became Kubernetes. And they've automated the heck out of all manner of things. So with that as a lead up, how many people do you think, and they get about 20 billion, I think it was network events, alerts per day. How many people do you think they claim to have in network operations? How many people would yield big system integrator have? We shouldn't answer that because they're billable, right? So they want to have a lot. But how many do you think that Facebook has? More than 100? Less than 100? Anyone want to? The over or the under? The under. They claim to have 3. They claim to have 3 people in network operations. Now, in reality, what they've done is taken some network skills and put them in the teams. So you have DevOps as a fundamentally different way of organizing your teams. And they've automated the heck out of things, right? So, and they're Facebook. I mean, they are like one of the giant sucking sounds in Silicon Valley that is just sucking great talent in the Valley and all right around the world. So it's a little unfair, but nonetheless, that gives you an idea of what is possible. No ops. It's a crazy term, but there's some truth to it. Here is yet another more traditional company. This is from Verizon, and I actually stole this slide from their presentation at a DevOps Summit. So again, you see this. And all I'll say about this is I've sold to, worked with Verizon. Difficult company to work with, traditionally big carrier, right? Tended to move quite slowly, and at some point they said, oh man, our future is at risk if we don't figure out how to build technology and get it out there faster for our users. And so their first step, and this is very common, I was chatting with a friend who's one of the partners at, anyway, one of the US cloud technology partners, one of those sort of DevOps integrators. He was saying he sees this pattern all the time, which often you start by, it's a huge opportunity, by the way, for our local outsourcers, data center consolidation. I remember when I was talking to JPMC, at one point they had 112 data centers. Like, what? Okay. And every year they're trying to crunch down. That's something they can get their heads around. It's a CFO-friendly thing, right? Like, let's close some data centers. That often is how it starts. Lift and try to shift. And we're seeing this, frankly, in the storage market in a way. The first step that people take when they want to containerize storage is take the old monolithic storage controller and cram it in a container and say, we've done it, So that is often the first step. But then you get into this cloud native transition where you start to slice off what's new. So the new teams don't have to use the old tooling. One of the cultural mindsets is often you don't really get to tell the new team what tooling they're going to use. You just tell them, hey, we need something new out there. And they come up with some tooling and they push it out. And so they claim that they're getting some real big outcomes as well, 40% efficiency. If I were advising them, I'd say, yeah, guys, 40% efficiency. Yeah, Facebook is not 40% more efficient, right? They're 40, 50 times more efficient. But nonetheless, you're seeing this kind of two-step process quite often. Lift and shift, consolidate, and then start to do some cloud native things, maybe on the side initially, for all your net new tech. So what challenges have I seen? We were small at StackStorm, but hundreds of users, customers that I got to know fairly well. So what challenges did I see? I mean, first off, it's a skills challenge and/or a mindset challenge. One of our PhDs, chief architects at the StackStorm, talked about working at Amazon. One of the first things they do is give you a pager. Right? This is like, wait a minute, I have a PhD. Like, you don't get it. Like, I've built great products elsewhere. Why? Yeah. Welcome. I mean, DevOps means developers. Get the errors, right? They get those escalations. So that is non-trivial, full stack as well. This is a big issue, I think, in the storage space where it turns out storage is really hard, and expecting somebody who knows about automation, knows about CI/CD, how to get software out, knows about anti-patterns and patterns, and knows Docker and so forth, to also really understand how do you keep data safe in a scale-out environment. That's pretty hard. So my point is, right now, the folks, Facebooks and others who are doing quite well, have access to incredible talent who are willing to wear the pagers, and that's kind of rare. The other thing I see is that in these environments, you often see them grow organically. So you have emergent architectures. So you as a developer, you may see, hey, I'm working at Amazon, I'm able to get builds out, get code into production pretty quickly. But that meta level understanding of, well, how do we actually run the whole thing together is very hard to come by. And if you're not careful, you end up in rather brittle environments. So what I'm trying to get at is CI/CD may be fully automated, but the thing that then says, okay, we need a new build now, the overall orchestration ties together hundreds or thousands of components, that itself can be really brittle. And this is an area where Kubernetes, I think, is doing a tremendous amount of good, which is giving us a common pattern for, hey, this is a good way to orchestrate the environment in an open way. You can still have opinions, it's not super opinionated, but it's tremendously important to have a common set of tools that we can innovate off of. Other challenges, transparency. I mean, why is holacracy, if I'm pronouncing it right, why are these sort of take agile and run your whole business that way? Why are those not more popular in the C-suite among CEOs? Because they involve a lot of transparency. It's culturally uncomfortable, sort of, I think, probably irrespective of your culture. It's a little, I find it uncomfortable, right? So this level of transparency is non-trivial. Communities themselves can go off the rails. Again, having cloud native is helping there. Infrastructure as code, really important. Some would argue, I think that some of the DevOps studies have suggested that if there's one thing, we actually used it as a qualifying statement for StackStorm. We would go in and say, okay, you guys are doing DevOps, right? Yes, we are. Who's gonna not say they are, right? Okay, and you guys like StackStorm? Yes, we do. Are you using GitHub and Ops? Why would we do that? We'd say, talk to us in 6 months. We'll be back if you want. But, because if you're not change controlling your configurations, again, this sort of meta control layer that is actually enabling your environments, you're not doing DevOps, right? Because you're not now able to iterate the actual fabric that ties your environment together as you can your code. So it's not enough to just get the code out faster, you've got to tie it together and push it out. Failure, be uncomfortable with failure, and persistence. Persistence is really important. Yeah. And I don't just mean using stateful applications, although that would be good if you had the right storage. That's an inside joke, I guess. What projects? I'll just say, wow. These are vanity metrics, I guess. So this is Kubernetes, of course. This is stars, I can read that. This is commits, that's not really a vanity metric. And just out and out, a stunning level of adoption in the Kubernetes community. A fundamental force. And certainly we're betting on it, not just in terms of this company, OpenVS, but otherwise personally betting on it. So I've gone through pretty quickly some pain points I've seen, some lessons I've learned. And at this point, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing, and I'm going to try to do it in the context of what is the user experience? What should it be? And when I say the user, I mean you. What should the experience be like in what I sometimes call the developer-defined data center? This notion of software-defined data center is a little abstract, right? It's you, it's your productivity, it's us, the engineers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that user experience ought to be and where we see it breaking down specifically in our niche. So I don't want this to come off as a marketing spiel. We're an open source company. We need participation. Participation doesn't necessarily mean you've got to, work on the file system. You can if you want. It can mean saying, guys, your downloads suck. Just tell us, or giving us feedback. There's lots of ways to participate in open source communities. In our particular case, we're what, 10 minutes away, 20 minutes away. So, one option is come by and have some free chai and hang out with us. That's participating as well. So, this is all you needed to know about Kubernetes. Not really. You have Ian in the room and others, but when we started talking about software-defined data centers, many years ago, 8 years ago or so, I think many of us imagined something like this being possible, right? Which is we're developing, we just throw a file in with our microservice, with our piece of software, and somehow everything else is done. I don't have to open a freaking ticket and wait for IT to provision a VM. And why a VM? I have a whole set of painful stories about working with IT over the years. I don't want any of that. What I want is infrastructure as code. I have a little YAML, right? A little human readable and executable piece of code that I drop in, and I just want the magic to happen, right? I just want it to work. It's not just Kubernetes. There's a lot of other pieces there, but more or less, this nirvana is coming true today. And if you're not working in an environment where, again, your code can roll with some help from Kubernetes or something else, lots of instant testing, continuous deployment into production, then that's okay. But you are massively less productive than your peers who are working at these kinds of places. So this magic is happening. This qualifier is an important one. It says stateless, right? Stateless, which is a lot of important stuff. Websites, a lot of applications themselves can be built in a way that maximizes the use of really stateless components. But when you get into the stateful world, and we were just chatting in the halls about KubeCon, which I missed in Berlin, but I think there was a lot of discussion about this. When you get into stateful workloads, in general, things are still broken. And this is a little bit ugly, but what we're trying to say is that the answer in general, when you're taking containers and running stateful databases, as an example, on them, in general, the answer is, okay, stop treating them like ephemeral things that you can kill anytime, which is more or less how you can treat a container. Instead, care and feeding, and tightly couple your containers to your underlying storage. And if you do that, and if you don't sneeze too loud, you're going to be able to run stateful. And we have a user, a friend, who is kind of a CTO at Pearson, a publishing company in the UK, Chris Jackson. And his team has done a lot of work in Kubernetes around a variety of things, and also in StackStorm, so that's how I came to know him. And they are running stateful workloads. They have some of the guys from MongoDB, I can't remember the name of the team that they brought in, but they are running, so you can do it. They are running MongoDB. They're using some StackStorm around it to sort of do the care and feeding that otherwise humans would have to do. It's possible. It's really painful. It's not done much. There's one analyst who may be here, actually I remember I was on a briefing with them, and their comment to me was, look, people today aren't running workloads in general that are stateful on containers. And I'm like, yeah, that's right, because they don't have the right storage underneath to do it. And he basically said, yeah, but they're never going to do it. They're just going to give up, and they're not going to go there, because it is too hard. I don't think so, but I do think it's quite broken today. And so we make the magic happen, or we enable you to really have a very similar user experience. Interpret the YAML, and through a lot of code, enable the storage to actually deliver the functionality necessary, data protection policies, and so forth. Now, when I say we do this, to be clear, it's open source. The current release is 0.1. Okay? 0.2 comes out any day. It's a fairly new community. We're looking for participation. Actually, a lot of people probably in this room are already participating, not just people wearing OpenEBS shirts. But, so thank you for that. But this is where we're headed. So I'm going to try to talk for just a few more minutes and be, maybe I'll sound like a jerk. I hope not. But what would I do were I you, right? And first off, it's the golden age, right? So the first point is, set aside OpenEBS. I mean, rage quit is an option, but keep your standards high, right? Developers, right? I'm not going to jump up and down like Steve Ballmer. Because I'm a Spartan racer, I could probably do it for 45 minutes. If you guys really want me to, maybe. Developers. But the first thing is raise your expectations. And by doing that, you're going to find others in the community, online, GitHub, et cetera, who are going to help you punch through some barriers to your own productivity that seem almost sacrosanct. It's just the way we do things around here. That is such BS. And the way that we're going to transform tech is by each of us individually saying, I'm just tired of it. You know what? Why can't I commit code in? Why do I have to wait for some other team? Or why do I have to be the bottleneck for some other team? Why can't we move faster and take Agile, not just as a thing that we use in our sprints here, but as almost a way to operate the whole company? And it's important because your companies, our companies, all companies are at threat to the extent that they don't adopt a DevOps mindset. So you'll be doing your own company a tremendous amount of good, as well as, I think, having more fun. So rage quit. And then the other thing, it's a small ask, but would you or somebody here, please save the world? I don't know, there's missiles flying this morning. It can be a little bit distressing at times. We're obviously electing idiots, more or less, interesting politicians in the United States at times. But I do think software is eating the world, maybe software packaged in containers in a highly automated way with Agile and DevOps is eating the world, and it comes from folks who have the expectation that it's possible. It comes from folks who have the realization that your own productivity, you're never going to get that minute back, right? You're never going to get that day back. So by really driving towards your own productivity, you're going to have the ability, I think, to not just contribute to great massive projects like Kubernetes, but start projects or start companies, which is already obviously happening quite a bit, 10,000 started. Warehouse being a good example of it. And thereby to force change on a world that needs it. So that minor ask is what I've got. And again, really looking forward to hanging out with you guys today. These are some of the talks that I'll be at, but I'll be out in the hall. And yeah, I've got 2 minutes and 9 seconds for questions. If anyone has questions or comments, or if you could just, boom me off the stage, whatever you're listening. So thank you. Question, anyone? Yes?
So you said about Docker Swarm and the slide you said about Kubernetes out in operation.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question about Docker Swarm. The slide you said about Kubernetes adoption and Docker Swarm adoption.
Right.
Was that in 2015? Before the 1.12 came in, I think.
Good question. So no, that was quite recent. There may be errors in it because I personally typed the numbers off GitHub into an Excel spreadsheet. But that was probably, and I tweeted it probably a week ago, so roughly a week ago, I believe. Yeah, thank you.
So we have been hearing quite a lot about digital disruption, right? So DevOps also is part of it. So how do you see Kubernetes being or influencer with that part? What kind of disruptions are we looking in the future?
Digital disruptions. Yeah, I mean, I see almost every value chain in the world. I have a friend who used to be a competitor, but Kevin Brown is CEO of this company that is instrumenting through IoT and software the entire food delivery life cycle. His co-founder used to run Nestle North America, fascinating company. Food, and literally the health and wealth of chicken served on your plate, the whole value chain. And he thinks it's $1 billion plus opportunity, or he wouldn't be spending his time. So digital disruption in new ways of really delivering the goods and services, the clean water, et cetera, that we live on. I think it's all. So Kubernetes I view as digital commons in a way, right? So shared commons in which we can all participate in delivering and consuming some of the fundamental operating pieces that tie together our more highly automated software and tech development environments and operations environments. So yeah, Kubernetes, and why it's so important is because automation in tech has been around since time immemorial, and it often ends up being, for a lot of reasons, like the lack of containers, not fully adopted. But another reason is because it hasn't always been open source. So I think Kubernetes is a fundamental piece, and again, a digital commons, if you will, that we can use.
Hello. Hi.
I'm Deepak. In the same line of one question I have that there are multiple orchestration environment available, like Mesos Marathon also is there and there are others are also there. So for a user, what parameters you should consider before deciding which one is the right choice, or it is just a Kubernetes we should go always?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is it ought to be an engineering decision. You shouldn't trust me to tell you. It should be what fits for you and your use cases, those that you see today and those coming. The second thing I would say is there's going to be some discussions on that, and I think it's the right question. Right? Which tool should I pick given what I know about my use cases? So I tend to be a little bit of a Kubernetes fanboy here, as you can hear. But yeah, it should be engineering driven by you, by your teams, and it should be about what use cases obviously you see coming. So I don't have a hard and fast. I mean, I could just quote what I've seen out there, you know, why Twitter did X, not Y, and some of the operators I'm closer to. But it's case by case, and you have to have the wherewithal to be able to make that decision based on your environment.
Option. How do you see the maturity of OCI and adoption of both Kubernetes and Docker to the OCI specification?
Right. Well, we got in the room and later on Ian talking about that. So I can see metrics around it. I was at this Linux Fest, like leadership fest, a month ago in Tahoe, as it happens. We were chatting about it. It looks real and strategic. Yeah, I mean, I know the thing I would say is that one of the things you look for in an open source project when you invest your time in it is who's really behind this thing? What are their motivations? And in this case, I mean, it's Google. Right? It's very different than the OpenStack world where you had competing legacy vendors contributing. Not that I love OpenStack, but that was a very different set of business imperatives for those vendors than for what we're seeing from Google specifically. So I think their inclinations may be somewhat self-serving, I'm sure, but they align extremely well with creating and supporting something that's going to be fundamental for us all. So that's Kubernetes, but also, as I said, I think OCI. So there's some very good reasons and a lot of thought, and a lot of people a lot smarter than me, with infinite money, this is Google after all, who have thought through this. So I think it's a irresistible force myself, and I'm betting time and money on that. But I could be wrong. It's a good question. Yes?
Recently, there is something coming up as serverless architecture.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about Thank you. So, recently, one term is coming up with something like serverless architecture.
Right.
So, what do you think about how it will go with the DevOps or containerization in future?
Right. Yeah, I may need to ask you that question back. I mean, it's fascinating. One of the guys I know, I got to know the last several years is now, he's like VP of architecture at Amazon, which is, it's an interesting role, but he's Adrian Cochran. So he's out there talking about FAS, right? Functions as a service. And when Lambda hit, it did feel a little bit like, that spike in interest in Kubernetes, or the spike that we saw on Docker. It was, I think, a pivotal moment. It was a great reinvent moment when they launched it. So there's another company with a lot of force behind it, Amazon. I think they've thought it through. And importantly, it makes your lives better in a lot of ways, right? And that is a real key driver. I mean, it's somewhat unbelievable, right? Give them a snippet of code, and they basically say, I'm going to run it. Don't worry about scale. It's going to happen. I'll only charge you when we actually need to invoke the code. That is really powerful. So yeah, I think it's here to stay and close to companies that are sort of in that ecosystem, right? Like, okay, how are you going to do application performance management for that, right? For that specifically set of use cases, and then yeah. So, but how is it going to interact? I don't quite know. It's a real answer. You have now open source projects, obviously WISC and others that are enabling functions as a service. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting, but it's part and parcel of the same trend. I will say, I mean, I've got to say it as a kind of an old open source fanboy. It worries me a little bit, right? I mean, it's good. Make your life easier and easier. But eventually you're so, I mean, now we're talking your application is really locked into this vendor, right? So hopeful that OpenWhisk and other solutions will enable people to be able to maybe have more portable functions, right? So you're not fully locked in. I mean, data gravity is bad enough, but now when you've really written pieces of your app so they only run well on one vendor's cloud, that can be, there's a part of me that is a little concerned about that. But yeah, I play with it. I mean, for somebody who's not a great developer, it's, I mean, and for great developers, but for me, I just find it incredibly exciting personally.
Thank you.